Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's UK and Northern Europe industry update from Tourism Australia. Thank you for joining us again. My name is Pete Mills, for those of you who don't know me, Partnerships and Distribution Manager based in London. Let me just take you through a few of the housekeeping rules this morning. For those of you who have dialed in before for this, for the sake of this webinar, we do mute you. But if you have any questions, please use the Q&A buttons at the bottom of your screen. Any unanswered questions we cannot cover on the webinar, we will respond offline. The webinar is being recorded today and will be available to watch on demand post-event. So first and foremost today, probably the question on each of your minds is around border openings. As you may have noticed, border restrictions have been easing domestically. However, we still don't have clarity on international borders just yet. But as we've said before, as soon as we do have any news, we will of course share that with you as soon as we are able. I also wanted to let you know that this will be the last industry update until the new year. And if you have any subject matters that you'd like us to talk about when we come to the new year, please do let us know in advance and we'll do our best to cover those off for you. Next month sees our virtual Australian marketplace. And for those of you who are attending, there will be plenty of opportunities to listen to our discussion panels around such subjects as the future of aviation, sustainability and well-being, and COVID-safe tourism. So make sure you tune in for those. Today, I am joined by my colleague at Visit Canberra to hear about what's going on down there. But first and foremost, I'm going to hand over to Tourism Australia's PR manager, Stuart Fife, who is going to be chatting with the host of our podcast series, All About Australia. The 5-part series, Only in Australia, was created by global publishing company Monocle and released in July this year. It's also worth noting that in 2020, podcast listenership grew by almost a third in the UK, while among those from the 18 to 35 age bracket, they are listened to by almost 50% of adults in the UK. It's a powerful way to reach the audience, and we're very pleased to be part of it. So Stu, just to cover that off, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Hi, everyone. This morning, we're delighted to be joined by journalist and broadcaster Georgina Godwin. She is heard regularly on Monocle's digital radio division, Monocle 24, as the station's books editor and hosts several programs, including Meet the Writers, The Globalist, and The Weekend Edition. In late 2019, Georgina took on the rather large task of recording and hosting a new series created in partnership with Tourism Australia called Only in Australia, for which she visited all 8 states and territories. And she's here with us this morning to share her experience. Good morning, Georgina.
Good morning. It's so lovely to be here, and it's just wonderful sitting recalling what I was doing a year ago, because of course this whole world has changed so drastically since then. But it's wonderful to have those memories and to be able to access them, you know, as a podcast.
Yeah, oh, definitely. It's a very different world to when you visited Australia last year. But before we get into the series, for those who aren't familiar with your work as a journalist prior to becoming the voice of Only in Australia, could you just give us a snapshot of your incredible career that ultimately has brought you to Monocle's headquarters here in London?
I'm Zimbabwean, so I was born and brought up in Zimbabwe. And I then thought I wanted to be an actor, so I went to Britain and went to drama school, and it turned out I was a very, very bad actor. And so I went home to Zimbabwe and worked for the state broadcaster for about 10 years. And during that time, the whole political situation was getting increasingly worse. And so some colleagues and I set up an independent radio station, but the President Mugabe at the time didn't like it very much and shut it down by presidential decree, which meant that we had to leave Zimbabwe. I had a tiny baby at the time, and it was quite difficult. And we came to Britain. It was the place with the closest time zone and language that you know, we knew we could still access Zimbabweans by shortwave radio. So that's what I did here, kind of sitting in London, broadcasting back to Zimbabwe, lots of political content. In that time, the Zimbabwean government decided that I was an enemy of the state, so I haven't really been able to go back. And then it just became clear that I was just doing the same story every single day. It was all about Zimbabwe and Mugabe, and I just thought, you know, at some point I do have to get a life and assimilate. And because I was in London, I thought I need to just cross into the mainstream media here, which I did, and started working at Monocle as a newsreader, oddly, and then just took on more and more work there. But I've maintained my freelance status because I think there are so many exciting and wonderful projects that you can do. And this was one of them where I didn't have to sort of take leave or get permission or do, you know, and it's nice to be able to meld my work with Monocle when I want to or not when I don't, and just have that kind of freedom, because for me, travel is this kind of huge pull. And the other kind of big strand of my work is hosting literary festivals. So I'll go to Adelaide, for instance, and just sit chatting to authors. And so not having a kind of full-time job means I can be in Sri Lanka or, I don't know, Lahore or somewhere, and do all this. Or at least I could. I can't anymore.
Yeah. True. Well, hopefully it's that's all not too far off from coming back again. Now you've interviewed an incredibly long list of very famous faces, and there are many well-known Aussies among them, and some of them are also friends. So it sounds like you've always had quite a sphere of Australian influence around you.
You know, and that's the thing, is that I find when you have a one-on-one interview and you're in the room with someone, you can see the whites of their eyes, so to speak. That's always the basis for something more, and you become intimate. So, for instance, Magda Subanski, the first time I met her, we were doing an on-stage interview, and we just clicked. And after that, it's like every time she's in London or I'm there, then we meet up. Ditto with people like Marcus Zuzak, who spent a weekend in London after I'd interviewed him at a festival. And he just, you know, you realize that these people might be really famous, but they're hundreds of thousands of miles from home, stuck in a hotel somewhere, and they do want to just play with the person that they met last. You know, so we had this wonderful time in London, and it was just great for him not to be Marcus Zuzak, just to be a tourist in London. And so, yeah, and also having been to Adelaide and done the festival there and meeting so many writers from Australia, and just sort of, you know, and people like, I don't know, J.M. Coetzee, who I never thought I'd get to meet. And it was wonderful just to be able to sort of connect with people like that. And then you do keep in touch, which is great.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, when I remember when we first spoke to you and the Monocle team about potentially doing a series about Australia, and I think it took you about 3 seconds to say, yes, I'd love to do it. What was it about the idea of doing a series about Australia that you were so drawn to?
So I think, firstly, my love of travel, but secondly, it's such an amazing country. And I knew I would never get the opportunity to see so much of it that this would afford. And I really wanted to get to know it. You know, there's been so much, I guess, history for me and my family and my friends with the place. And I just, and also just all of you guys at Tourism Australia were just so nice. I wanted to work with you, and I just knew it would be a smooth process, as indeed it was. And I know from your end it could not have been easy. So much work went into such an intricate itinerary, and I mean, we were changing things on a daily basis, and it was all just wonderful, actually.
Good. Oh, I'm glad to hear it. And I mean, we've been very pleased with the feedback that we've had from people who've heard the series and said that it really transports them to Australia as they listen. And we were just saying earlier this morning that it really does. Obviously, if you're a print journalist, you have words to transport your audience. With TV, you have visuals. What are the keys to creating an audio program like this? And how does it differ in terms of the tricks or the tools, including from the work you do as a radio news and current affairs journalist?
It's really interesting. I think if I had to choose one word, the key is layering, and it's layering sound and just making sure that you've always got too much sound, because you can always take it out, but you can't necessarily put it back in again. I have a tiny microphone, which is somewhere near here. It's about this big, and it's always in my handbag. So wherever I am, I can pull it out and just, you know, record whoever I'm talking to. And so I was doing that the whole way along, but I was also just, so for instance, standing quietly on a beach, just holding the microphone to get 2 minutes worth of sound, or lying in bed, getting the birds or the crickets or whatever. And so I think that's the exciting part of making a series like this, is putting sound upon sound upon sound, and also working with brilliant editors, because I'm not great on the sort of technical side, but I deliver them the audio, and then together we decide, you know, how to cut it. Because sadly, of course, you have way too much stuff, and then you've got to pull it right back. And I find it helps to work with someone else, because for me it's like killing your babies. You think, no, but then she said that brilliant thing and I've got to keep in that and I've got to keep in that. And when you've got an editor who just goes, no, the key message is this, all of that has to go. And it's quite sad, but it makes for a much more polished product. And I think sound can just give you so much more than what's on the page. When you're looking at the page, you're relying on the reader's imagination to fill in those gaps. When you're listening to it, those gaps are filled in, but can prompt your imagination in a visual way. It's a very sort of different way of working.
Yeah, and obviously with as you listen to the series, there are things like the sounds of, it's not just wildlife, it's fairies, there's industrial sounds and sounds of buildings as you're walking through them. Given that you were on, as you said, it was quite an impressive itinerary, and I'm happy to take the blame because I think you covered all 8 states and territories in under 6 weeks. Yeah. Given the frenetic pace of that, in that case, as you say, because there's an editing process later, do you almost not worry about the narrative and just record everything you can and then start to string that together as a narrative later on? Or do you think with the narrative as you're going and recording?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is that I was very, very well briefed. So you and your colleague Kate had just I just had all the information that I needed, and also the brilliant Sarah Shields. And all of you had just made sure that I knew exactly where I was going, who I was going to speak to, what their backstory was and everything. And so I read all that. I knew what I wanted to get out of every interview, but then I just let it run. And so the narrative kind of existed in the background, but yes, it mostly comes together later. But you absolutely have a through line. You know where you're going with it. It can't be random, because then you forget stuff.
Yeah. And obviously you covered an enormous amount in that time. But if I was to ask you to try and pull out 1 or 2 real sort of highlights or key moments that are stuck with you, is there anything that comes to mind?
That's the question I was afraid of, because it's a cop-out to go all of it. There were, so many deeply impressive people. Alla Wolf-Tasker at Daylesford, I think, is doing absolutely incredible things. She has put that community on the map, and I think it's only going to continue to thrive. And we were talking to her about maybe trying to do a literary festival there, or there's so much that could happen when you've got a driven individual in a place like that. Ditto Hayley Bailey and also the Morris family, and just so many people. Rather than places, I have to say it was the people that stood out. The places were incredible, but I was just so struck by the dedication and the hard work of the people running these places. I think I had one kind of moment, because as you say, it was this hugely busy schedule, where I'd jumped in a helicopter and flown off to Mount Mulligan, and it had been all go, 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 go. And some point sort of on the sort of next day, I suddenly felt myself just exhale. And being in the middle of the outback and just hearing water and all these sounds and that lovely dry heat. And just for a moment, it was like, I found peace, and it was amazing. But so much of it was, sorry, I can't single out a single thing.
No, I think Mount Mulligan is definitely a place where you can really exhale and relax, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and obviously Australia, and it's a place that you already knew well, and a lot of Australians. But was there anything from this experience that surprised you about Australia itself or about Aussies?
I think that we make a mistake here in Britain, kind of buying into the stereotype of, shrimp on the barbie and shorts to work and that kind of thing. I find Australia and Australians actually deeply sophisticated. I think that and that's something that I'm not sure people here really get. The level of knowledge in things like sort of wine or even literature or current affairs or whatever is enormous. And I think that it's we ignore that at our peril. Australians are sophisticated, intelligent people, and that stereotype is so outdated.
Yep. Yes. Now, while you were traveling, you spent a lot of time with Aboriginal Australians and their communities. To anyone who hasn't previously visited the country or experienced its Indigenous culture, what would you tell them are the things that they need to go and do and experience really to start to understand it?
I mean, again, to go back to people, Gail Tilbrook absolutely opened the doors for me. That she's at Marlingup, and she she has a place with art and food and all the rest of it, but she is clearly a community leader and deeply knowledgeable about everything to do with Indigenous culture. And she just, it was like having sort of culture 101 lesson with her, and she absolutely took me through everything. And it's very clear that the rest of the community look to Gail, and she advises a lot of people. I know she goes out and talks at schools or at companies and things like that. And so that was a great starting point for me. Hanging out with Juan Walker at Walkabout Adventures was extraordinary, because he's grown up there. It's his home. He's like taking you into his home. And one thing that I noticed, he and I were off together going, he took me to this wonderfully kind of deeply spiritual place. And as we're walking there, this huge tourist bus passes us and goes up and goes to some other part of the thing. And I was just like, why would you do that when you can be with him and get this one-to-one? I mean, it's probably a cost thing, I guess, but to have this tailored tour from somebody whose ancestors' bones are in the soil, you know what I mean? Why would you go on a tour bus with somebody shouting at you through a tannoy?
Absolutely. Now, Monocle, you're a media company that is very finely tuned into the public's perception of business, politics, design, and of course travel, as you mentioned, is a big one. With everything that has gone on this year, and we were saying earlier, it's extraordinary to think that when you were visiting Australia, and it was less than a year ago, and so much has changed since that time. What do you think the Monocle view is of how global travel will come back or reform in the next few years?
I think we're very, very we're very positive, and as a company we want to be forward looking, and we don't want to kind of shut down unnecessarily. Obviously we've, like everyone else, had to do a bit of a pivot to digital, and now digital subscriptions are available there. But I think we believe that it will come back, and that we need to keep pushing. Obviously, we have to do it in a safe way, and our offices are now very, very safe and everything. But we still went ahead with a big meet in St. Moritz. Our editors are still flying around the world. One of the things we've done is we've based quite a few people in Zurich now, so that people can have access to Europe without having to quarantine as they would have to do here in London. So it's very much a very positive take, I would say. I mean, even though when we do current affairs shows, obviously the kind of bad news keeps coming, lots of airlines failing, lots of planes being mothballed. But I think, there will be a way back, I hope.
Yeah, and hopefully soon. And there's been a lot of talk, and I know Monocle's written pieces about this as well, about maybe the ways that the traveller and the way that we travel will be a bit different, and be changed by the experience of sort of traveling less frequency but for longer. And do you think with that new mindset of the traveller, there are going to be some upsides for a country like Australia and what it offers?
I absolutely do. And I know that you've been working on a kind of sustainability program. And I think that is the way that the world is going to go now. We're going to be looking at reducing our carbon footprint. We're going to be looking at really getting extra value when we travel. I think traveling, kind of empty traveling, is probably going to be less frequent. We're going to go to places for longer. We're going to want more when we're there. We're going to want to, achieve things or make something happen. For me, I can't ever, I'm used to just like going to a beach for a week. I need to make sure that I've done something. I'm there to make a radio program or have a meeting or whatever it is. And I think that increasingly people will be doing that kind of thing. And I think that in Australia, you're absolutely perfectly placed to do this, because you can have everything from the beach holiday right through to the deeply cultural tour to Mona or whatever. There's so much, and it's like having 8 holidays in one. And I think that people will choose to do that much more and say, right, I'm just going to take a month out and spend it all in Australia, because I can have all these different experiences.
Yeah, great. Well, when we can send you back, maybe for Only in Australia Series 2, is there anywhere that you did go and you'd like to particularly revisit, or is there anywhere that you haven't been that we'd...
I've never been to the Great Barrier Reef. So I would like to do that. And I also just, again, it's lovely to combine. So I'd love to go back and do, I don't know, the Adelaide Literary Festival again, or Perth or Melbourne. They've all got fantastic book events. And it's lovely just to sort of combine that with the travel and with everything, and with meeting people. And I just, yeah, I mean, once again, I just have to say it's about all those incredible people that I met, just in every single town, that the care and the just the very obvious dedication to their work, but just being thoroughly nice people. So thank you.
Glad to hear it. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Georgina. We really appreciate you joining us this morning. If anyone would like to listen to Only in Australia, you can hear it on the Monocle app, on Spotify, and on the podcast apps for Apple and Android. Thank you so much, Georgina.
It's a pleasure.
Now it's back to you, Pete.
Thank you, Stu, and thanks, Georgina. Those insights were absolutely fascinating. Today, I am joined by Sarah Starr, Assistant Director, Partnerships and Distribution at Visit Canberra, who is here to take us through what the Capital Territory has to offer. Good morning, Sarah. Or good evening, your time.
Good. I have to say good evening, good morning.
Good evening.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I guess to start off with, Sarah, how would you sum up Canberra to someone who maybe hasn't visited before?
Well, we're the capital, but of course everybody knows that. But I'd say we're more than just the capital. We're a bit more than meets the eye. We're different. We're a different kind of capital city. We're planned. We're very small. We've only got about 400,000 people. There's no sky-rise buildings. We're very relaxed. Lots of nature around us and no congestion. So it's not, yeah, we're just different is how I'd sort of sum us up. Everywhere is very close as well to get to. So within about 15 minutes drive, you can basically see lots of different things in the city. So you can pack a day full of activities. But instead of me talking about it, I thought I'd play just a little video that talks about some locals talking about the city.
We're more than just roundabouts.
We're more than cold winters.
We're more than the capital.
We're more than a home to politicians and public servants. We're home to makers, designers and community who love the arts. From the largest collection of Indigenous artworks at the National Gallery of Australia to the smallest gallery in the world, right here in my backyard.
We're a city that wakes up to balloons dotting the sky and ends the day with spectacular sunsets. We've got places like the amazing Mulligan's Flat Woodland Sanctuary, right here in the suburbs of Canberra. It's also home to eastern bettongs and quolls and a few other species that have been reintroduced. Where else in Australia can you walk through a sanctuary like this for free, or book into a twilight tour and have a much better chance of seeing some of these nocturnal marsupials?
We've got an entire calendar of beautiful changing seasons. Roadside blossoms and picnics by the lake in spring, picking blackberries and swims at Point Hut Crossing in the summer, blankets of beautiful, colourful leaves and the very first smells of people's wood fires in autumn, and plates of delicious local truffle in the winter.
I love that video. That's great. So we heard from Anne in the video that Canberra is a community that loves its arts, and that's, you can definitely tell. What experiences can visitors have in Canberra around the arts and culture?
Well, there's so much to do in terms of arts and culture. Being the capital, we are home to all of the major national attractions. So things like the War Memorial, Parliament House, National Gallery of Australia and National Museum of Australia. And actually all of these are members of the Cultural Attractions of Australia. So they all have quite newly designed and newly launched tours, which are behind the scenes tours. So they're sort of your premium exclusive experiences. I've done them all and they are amazing. One example was Parliament House. You are taken down into tunnels underneath the building, which are not open to the public. It's like a whole city of tunnels down there. It's crazy. And the food, you get some amazing food from the award-winning executive chef David Learmonth there. And while he was cooking one of our meals, so he cooked us a souffle, and while he was whisking up the eggs in the kitchen, he's having a chat about the sort of there's different food that he can be making. So on budget night, which is actually tonight, he can be serving up to 6,000 people in one night, or on another time he could be doing just a private dinner for the Prime Minister and like a visiting president or Prime Minister or dignitary from another country. And he was also telling us that they actually try to source most of their food or a lot of their produce from the Canberra area and the Canberra region. So we sort of say within 1 to 2 hours drive around Canberra within New South Wales, we claim it a little bit as the Canberra region. So yeah, he tries to source a lot of his produce there. And following the bushfires, for example, he really went out to a lot of the farms there to try and help some of those farmers to essentially buy his year's worth of tomatoes from a particular farmer, which was incredible, to sort of help them get back on their feet. So that's just one example, but all of those attractions, those behind the scenes tours, they're looking at doing a joint ticket, which should launch domestically, hopefully in the next couple of months, which will then roll out internationally, which will be fantastic to sort of do all 4 experiences across 2 days. Otherwise, if people aren't sort of into that behind the scenes stuff, all of the national attractions are free to the public, and a lot of them run tours that are either free or like a small charge for sort of open tours. And yeah, there's some amazing things to see.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So on to collections of a different kind. Many people don't know that Canberra has a nearby wine region. Now, I'm told by my colleague Ben that in one of his favourite wines is produced here, and I think you probably know which one it is.
I do. Knowing Ben very well, it'll be the Clonakilla Shiraz Viognier, which is a delicious drop. So he does have good taste. Yeah, we do. We've got a little sort of boutique wine region. So there's about 30 wineries, cellar doors within 30 minutes drive of the city. And the region itself was actually pioneered by scientists in the 70s. So they sort of got together and were looking at what sort of types of varieties they think would grow in Canberra, given our climate. So they're called cool climate wines. So basically we have 4 very distinct seasons in Canberra. So we have hot summers with cool nights, and then we have cold winters, cold days with very, very cold nights. So it can get down to sort of -8, -9, -10, sometimes even overnight in winter. So they sort of had to try and work out what would work. So we're sort of known as for Rieslings and Shirazes, but there are a few other varieties that are kind of growing here now too. I went on a tour out there actually to the wine region a couple of weeks ago with some girlfriends, and I was just reminded by how lovely the region is, because it is very small. Like a lot of the operations are tiny operations, and it's a husband and wife team or a brother and a sister, and you can actually, when you're at the cellar door, you're often talking to the owner or the winemaker, which we did on some of those. One notable one was called McKellar Ridge, and they were like fantastic. So yeah, it's sort of a different, again, it's that sort of more boutique experience, which is great.
Yeah, sounds so good. And anybody planning a trip down into to Canberra, how long would you sort of say they need to stay there? How many days?
So we generally say sort of 3 days, 2 nights, or 2 to 3 nights, depending. We think it's a really good addition to like an East Coast itinerary. Obviously, we don't pitch Canberra as a destination solely for an international traveller, particularly for Brits coming down. Obviously, they want to see lots. And after hearing Georgina mention that they think it might be a month-long stay in Australia, which would be great, they can really get around. But we think, it is such a different city and a different experience to your Sydneys and your Melbournes, and we're sort of in the middle there, so it's definitely worth coming across. There's lots to do for families, so it's a real family destination. There's lots of attractions that are around for kids, free playgrounds. One of my favourite experiences is fish and chips by the lake, which I do with my family often. And yeah, lots of different things. You can fill a couple of days itinerary with food is always a good one too. We've got lots of delicious coffee and fine dining restaurants as well, and breweries. And there's also lots of space. So again, who knows what the future travel is going to look like, but we are a lot of nature parks. So 50%, more than 50% of the Australian Capital Territory is actually nature reserve. And that means the city itself is full of nature reserves. So you can do lots of bushwalking and get out and sort of not see anyone for a while, even literally in the middle of the city. And then about 40 minutes out is even more. So we've got Namadgi National Park and Tidbinbilla Nature Reserve, which is where you can see lots of animals as well, native Australian animals. Sometimes you can even actually see kangaroos hopping around around in the streets in Canberra when they're looking for some water. So there's another little exciting thing you can see. But we also really say it's a great spot to base yourself. So particularly for people that are wanting to self-drive, it's a fantastic place to self-drive around in itself. We've got no tolls, no congestion. But then from about 2 to 2.5 hours, you can be at the South Coast, or the New South Wales South Coast, beautiful little towns and amazing beaches. Or inland, you can be the Snowy Mountains, so which does have snow and ski resorts in winter, or horseback riding and bushwalking and things in summer. So it's sort of really great place to sort of, I guess, see lots of Australia in sort of the one spot. So I think there's lots to do, and a lot of times visitors find more than they came for when they're here.
Absolutely. And Sarah, it'd be remiss of me not to mention the current pandemic. And how is the industry faring in Canberra at this time?
Yeah, we're doing okay. We're quite lucky in Canberra. We haven't had an active case for quite a while, but having said that, everybody is still, it's obviously very vigilant, and everyone's obviously very on top of what they need to be. A lot of our businesses are adapting. So the national attractions that I was talking about that were free entry, they've sort of changed their models. Still free entry, but they've got pre-booked timed tickets, so they can limit the numbers of people obviously in the buildings and make it easier for contact tracing, etc. All of our cafes and restaurants are open, which is great. They've just got capacity limits, and a lot of our tour operators are now running private tours as opposed to booking people on a big coach to sort of go out to the Rhine region, for example. It's all now very much private groups and not mixing groups together. So definitely adapting, and yeah, we're looking forward to welcoming visitors again when we can.
I know. I think we're looking forward to coming back down. So when the time is right, we'll be there.
Yeah.
Sarah, thank you so
Can't
much.
wait.
That was really insightful. And I shall let you get on and enjoy the rest of your evening. But thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So that's it for today. And that just leaves me to thank today's guests. So Georgina from Monocle, obviously Sarah from Visit Canberra, and my colleague Stu from the PR team. That leaves me to just say that we will be sending out an email with a link to today's recording. So look out for that shortly. And also look out for the invite to our next webinar in the new year. For those of you attending next month's Marketplace Online, Australia Marketplace Online, we will see you there, obviously. But in the meantime, take care, stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.